In this edition of 2020 Daily Trail Markers, Mayor Pete Buttigieg recently wrapped a 4-day bus tour across Iowa. His campaign is also increasing spending in the state, adding more staff and offices. It comes as a recent Des Moines Register poll shows support for the South Bend, Indiana mayor is down since June. But that same poll shows him with an 8-point increase in favorability among likely Democratic caucus goers. Buttigieg told CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe that he's focusing his arguments on electability as he works to win over voters in the key early state.
I think we got to do well here. I think that definition will become a little clearer in the wintertime. But yes, we've got to do well in Iowa. Look, first of all, the best way to settle any question about electability is to win an election somewhere. Secondly, Iowa's a very good place for us to campaign. It reminds me of home. It's got a similar feel. And because of the way the caucuses work, it really puts a premium on the relationships that only a well-organized team can build. And we've got a team that is developing a reputation for being great to work with, having a nice touch. We're very proud of that.
You're a millennial. I'm a millennial. You know the knock on millennials from older people. Is that fair? I mean, what is it that they're getting wrong about our generation?
Well, I'm not sure that everybody understands how hardworking people are in this generation, and they'll definitely be seeing how hardworking I am just by virtue of the way this campaign unfolds, and the same is true for everybody on our team. I will say, though, I've actually been struck by how many people of the boomer generation come up to me on rope lines and talk about their enthusiasm for generational leadership. Now, one of the characteristics that every winning Democrat has had, from Clinton through back through Carter and to JFK and Obama too, is representing a new generation coming from not having been in Washington for too long. And I think folks are ready for that in the party and in the country.
Let's bring in CBS News 2020 campaign reporter Jack Turman. He's in Washington. Jack, you were on the bus tour with Buttigieg. What was that like, and how does that play into his overall campaign strategy?
Well, it was certainly very interesting, to say the least, especially with all the news a day going on regarding the whistleblower complaint and the House ramping up and launching a formal impeachment inquiry. But, outside of the news a day stuff, it was interesting because he's a very big Notre Dame football fan as well. And when the bus tour started, the Notre Dame-Georgia football game was going on, and he was very curious in highlights there. But more so in terms of how does this play in the overall campaign, there were some similarities to Senator John McCain's 2000 Straight Talk Express. For Buttigieg, it's all about transparency here. Early on when he announced, he was on a lot of cable shows, did a lot of interviews to really boost that name ID and get that recognition on a national audience. And I would say a big difference here, but still showcases that transparency, is that in comparison to the Straight Talk Express, is that obviously the influence of social media here. You could tweet out, what he's saying right away. You could basically see how he reacts in real time and tweet it out. And also, when the UN General Assembly was going on, we had that on in the background. So it was very interesting seeing Buttigieg just very intently watch Trump on the national stage speaking to other world leaders.
We heard Buttigieg discuss the importance of Iowa in that clip we played from his interview with Ed O'Keefe. A recent Des Moines Register poll shows him polling at 9% and in 4th place. How is his campaign trying to connect with voters in that state, in Iowa?
Yeah, the campaign has been pushing out, or have said really early on, especially their state director, who is also on the bus tour, who said, early on they really wanted to focus on relationship organizing instead of starting off with the frequent cold calls and trying to get to know organizers and other volunteers in the state. And by what they mean by relationship organizing is basically kind of talking to your friends, family members, and starting in that network and then expanding that network to broaden the base out a little bit. And Buttigieg has said as well that that was the plan, but also kind of connecting with voters on the electability argument here, kind of talking about how he would square up against Trump, noting his military background, noting that he's from the Midwest, and noting that he's just from a different generation to try to convey his message to Iowa voters.
I want to play some more of that interview with Buttigieg, where he was asked about his health care plan and criticism of those other Democratic presidential candidates. Let's take a listen.
In recent days, you and some others have been calling out Elizabeth Warren for the fact that she will not admit that her Medicare for All plan would require a tax increase for middle-class Americans. Does your plan require a tax increase for middle-class Americans?
No, we can fund what I am proposing without raising taxes on any but perhaps the top 2%. Now, I do believe that our tax code needs to be fairer. There are corporations and very wealthy Americans who should be paying their fair share and aren't. And we're going to adjust that, not just in order to fund our health care plan, but in order to fund the needs of this country. It's not punitive. It's not unreasonable. It's just what we need in order to make sure that we can move forward as a country.
You're still struck.
Jack, does the Buttigieg campaign feel that focusing on healthcare is a winning strategy?
Yeah, I think that, healthcare is one of the predominant issues for voters. Democrats in 2018 really drove home the healthcare message to take back the House. And all Democrats are really pushing their own healthcare plans. But seeing where there's differences on the policy, that's kind of to be determined. Buttigieg also released today a healthcare ad touting his Medicare for All Who Want It plan. He's talked about that a lot on this bus tour in Iowa, saying, my plan is different than Senator Warren's and Senator Sanders, and didn't name them explicitly. But basically that his plan offers a public option where you could keep your private insurance if you want it. And that healthcare ad released today also goes back to that point and says, look, I will give you the choice as a voter, as an American, to make that choice if you want to opt into this government plan or to keep your private health insurance.
Buttigieg was also asked about his personal life and how that is being discussed on the campaign trail. I want to play some of what he had to say about that.
You are a gay man. You are now ranked at least 4th in Iowa, and you're doing pretty well nationally. Has the history or the historic nature of what you're doing set in yet?
It's certainly moving when people of different ages come up to me at campaign events. High schoolers who let me know that I've made it easier for them to get through their day. People my parents' age with tears in their eyes who did not think something like this was ever going to be possible in their lifetime. And so I'm very conscious that there's a historic quality to this campaign. And at the same time, it's important to me that no one element of my story defined me. This is part of who I am, just like the fact that I'm a veteran and the fact that I'm a mayor, the fact that I'm young and the fact that I come from northern Indiana. And taken together, they add up to a story that I hope explains why I am motivated to lead America into a new sense of belonging as well as a better set of policies for our future.
Jack, are we going to see Buttigieg start to use his personal narrative more in his stump speech and maybe even on the debate stage?
Yeah, on the personal side of things, he frequently talks about his marriage, actually, as a part of his values portion of his stump speech in regards to freedom. He tells audiences in his stump speech, my marriage exists because of one vote on the Supreme Court. And he's basically saying that that is the freedom that we need to, maintain and progress moving forward. But he also got more personal on the bus as well. Chasten, who's his husband, he talked about and said, early on that it's really tough on their marriage, but this is the conversations that they had before Buttigieg announced, and that they keep their marriage going. And he also did say, though, that this very intense process of running for president has made them closer and the relationship stronger. Also, in terms of more personal things, he also mentions his military service a lot in some speech. He likes that argument. He said he welcomes that argument, especially when it goes or talking about his military service when he wants to go up against Trump during debates. He said in one speech earlier in Iowa this week, I've seen more incoming than a misspelled tweet. The audience laughed there. So he totally welcomes the debate on the commander-in-chief argument as well. And then also just the fact that he's a millennial mayor kind of fits into the broader theme of his campaign message, which is calling for generational change in American political leadership. So that's something that he will frequently talk about moving forward, especially in his stump speeches.
Jack Turman, thank you.